I'm back with Dr. George. George, it's great to be with you. You're looking good.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me again.
Nah, it's I really enjoy our conversations. Every time we do a podcast together, I sit back and I listen to it straight away. And the past couple have been really good. And today I wanted to talk to you about something different, something that you and I have spoken about privately. And I thought, we'll put it into a podcast and share it with the community out there. And it's around burnout, delegation, balance.
Yeah.
Let's start with burnout. What's your experience from a strategic perspective of burnout, how it comes about, and how it impacts so many entrepreneurs?
Look, burnout's one of those things where, they say you don't know your limit until you breach your limit. Yeah. So, burnout is one of those concepts that I think it's easy to talk in theory. A lot of when I use the word literature, I mean, there's a plethora of books out there and podcasts and so forth that talk about burnout. However, it's not until we actually go through it that we understand the severity of it and how detrimental it is, not just to yourself, but to, on your personal and on your business life as well. I've experienced it multiple times. I like to think that I'm getting better and better at it. However, burnout is very, very elastic, and I'm sure, Peter, you can understand this as well, right? Burnout is basically, the way I look at it is our tolerance workload, and then as we and it's almost akin to the stretching of an elastic. If you stretch it far enough, it kind of snaps. Like I said, I've experienced it in my early years from a professional perspective. I went through a severe case of it during my academic life as well. However, with the benefit of hindsight and a bit of maturity and a bit of strategic thinking, I like to think that I've kind of got a bit of a handle on it, right?
Tell me a little bit of, if you're comfortable sharing. Tell me a little bit about that burnout you experienced during your academic journey.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. And this is kind of moving into the personal. So I kind of immersed myself very quickly. I went from an MBA into a PhD with very little understanding on just how rigorous being a research candidate was. And so I immersed myself. I didn't give myself enough time. I really, talking about throwing yourself in the deep end, that's what I basically did. I was a prolific reader when I was at university because I had a lot of catching up to do, unlike my peers who had gone through the natural progression, an undergraduate degree, and with honors, and then, maybe a bit of a master's degree, and then into the PhD program. I kind of went into it I don't have an undergraduate degree, so it was almost, out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? And so with a huge gap, a huge knowledge gap that I had to fill, I really dedicated. What could I say? My PhD was a 5.5-year process, which also included a law degree in there as well. But I spent the first 3 years just working and studying until, there was a bit of a mental snap. And
tell me about the actual burnout period. So like,
yeah. All right. So that manifested itself in a significant bout of procrastination. So there was a period of about maybe 4 or 5 months of just kind of coming to my desk and not doing anything. There was, and I tried every particular strategy. I changed the way that I actually went to university. There was a stage where I was going at 10 o'clock at night, catching the train at 10 o'clock at night to university, staying there after 12 o'clock so that I knew that I would be stuck there and not have any kind of recourse for going home. I'd have to wait till 6 a.m. And I tried to force myself, to kind of complete my work. However, that failed as well. So all those kinds of strategies, really at the end failed. I had to go and seek, professional help. I also had to acknowledge the fact that I needed to take a step back and actually take some time away, and then go back to it in a very small incremental way.
Is that how you bounced out? You kind of went on a journey, and how did that make you stronger? Because I'm going to share when you finish how my burnout journey was, but how did you get stronger after that journey?
Well, it's almost it's. I mean, it's like this grief cycle where you kind of go down, and then when you go right to the bottom, there's that acknowledgement that there is clearly something wrong, that clearly something needs to be fixed. You need to step away and look at, and for what I did is I stepped away. I got some professional help, and then it's from that I didn't throw myself back at it again. I kind of took a very incremental process and built up my workload again, up until I kind of finished and submitted and so forth, right? But because of that experience, I'm very, very mindful of just how important it is to not only take time, but take time to do nothing. Right?
Yeah.
It's really, really important, because it's easy to fall into the trap, right, of being overwhelmed. Now, look, my workload is still very, very high, right? And what I do is still very, very time consuming. However, I mean, the boundaries of our workload are elastic, right? So you kind of, it doesn't, our ability to do work, kind of goes up and down, but it's elastic. And for me, it's still quite high. But however, what I've done now is I've acknowledged that I know what the signs are for when things are about to go wrong.
That's really important. And that's the point. I'm glad you raised it, because that's the point I want to get to. Thank you for sharing. I know it's quite hard. And, I think we've got to call it out. To each other. We've got to have a culture for sharing these things. And, for me, I had a similar experience. I was in London, in London, 13 weeks doing an accelerator program with my business partner, had my family back home. And I always push myself to the limit, but I push myself over the limit at this point. And that's where burnout manifested itself. And it's a humbling experience, because you have to recalibrate as you did, but then you get stronger. And then as you get stronger, you become better in identifying the markers that lead to burnout and managing them before. It's like fire hazard. If you've had a bushfire, you kind of know what you need to do to avoid another catastrophe. What are the markers, and how does academic literature, how does the work you do help identify and address those markers?
Yeah, look, going back to that, there's that old fable of the frog in the pot, right?
Yep.
It's very easy for a workload to be all consuming. Now, we need to, even though it's, this is a generic conversation, we also need to look at where people are in their work and personal, in their personal cycle. So if you're in your 20s, or you're an entrepreneur, workload is going to be all consuming. I mean, you're constrained for resources, you're constrained for knowledge. So a lot of this is going to be part and parcel of your journey. However, burnout, what we want to do is we want to make sure that, it comes down, for me personally, it comes down to capacity. When I'm hitting 80% of my capacity, right? When I start to see that my personal life is being overrun by my workload, these are the indications that it's time to kind of not only take a step back, because we can't take a step back because, as I said, growth is elastic. So what we start to do then is we need to, for me personally, is I start to say, okay, taking a step back, what are the aspects of my workload that need to be delegated? And then we kind of say to ourselves, well, what has to be delegated? Well, we start to ask ourselves, what in a list of tasks and responsibilities that we have that are the most valuable for what it is that I do? You list those out, you weigh those, and then you take the bottom quarter, and then you start to put strategies together around who can do what. Can it be automated? Can it be delegated? Or can it be outsourced? Right?
Yeah, for sure. And, it's a great point to arrive at that, if you're burning out and you're getting to the point where it's unpleasurable, you're doing business wrong. Business,
yeah.
It's okay to hustle. It's okay to push yourself to get to a point, but then you have to graduate and mature. And delegation is a natural part of the entrepreneurial or business growth cycle. At every point comes a time where you have to delegate. And what you've just given us, I want to dig deeper in it because you spoke about ranking priorities, which sounds fairly straightforward, but then implementation of delegation is where it doesn't work. And then you're back in that cycle of stressing again, burning out again. Why doesn't implementation work for most people? And how do you get it right?
Yeah, well, one of the things is that one of the first things is that when we start to identify the imbalance between work and your personal life, you're already pretty much up to your neck.
Mm-hmm.
And because your task consumed, and when you're consumed, when your thoughts are consumed by the tasks that have to be done, it's very hard to understand what needs to be done, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
So and this is where the professional health really is important. I mean, from a professional perspective, you get somebody from the outside to come in and actually, and here's where you need to be vulnerable, where you need to submit yourself to an external party, for them to break down what might need to be done. If you have the capacity to do that, fantastic, right? But if you're at 80%, 85% capacity, right, it is going to be very, very hard. And there's also there's a psychological barrier to that as well. One of the things that many entrepreneurs and founders and so forth have to grapple with is that nobody loves your business like you do. Nobody can execute. Most times, most people can't execute tasks to your level of expectation. However, we need to be mindful that these need to be delegated. They need to be assigned. You need to train people. You need to have patience, and you need to have the understanding that yes, individuals won't do the task as well as you do, but however, they still need to be done, right? And they still need to be done by somebody. And that's where expectation and reality kind of clash together.
Let's dig in on that. A lot of times you delegate to someone that can't do it as good as you. You need to train them, so you end up doing more work to have the task being done not as good as you. And that's a trigger to break that cycle and go back into the old habit of doing it yourself. Let's talk about that expectation. When you do delegate, what should your expectations be at the beginning, middle, and future?
Yeah, the expectations at the beginning need to be really, really low, right? Yes, they're not going to do it to your standards, and this is where the failure really lies at that beginning, where your expectations are high. However, the reality is that its execution is going to be very, very low. It is really incumbent on you to understand, right, that you're coming into this and you're expecting the individual that's to take your task to know the role as well as you and be experienced and be dedicated and motivated as well. It's not usually the case. I say this from experience. It's very frustrating when you're delegating something to, especially a subordinate, right, who doesn't have the skill set or the background or the experience or the knowledge that you have. And you get frustration. The other individual feels like a failure, and it's kind of this negative feedback loop. And that's from my experience where the failure has been. And then all of a sudden, instead of me having the patience to kind of see this through, you reclaim that task, and you just kind of bring it back again. And all you've done is that you're continuing your burnout, right, and demotivated, a subordinate, right, or an individual within your organization.
You've basically screwed it up. You haven't done delegation right. 80-90% of the time, that's what happens. What does success look like? If success isn't this delegation being as good as me or to my standard, what should an excellent delegation first step look like? What would you?
I think you need to realize your own psychology. Are you able to execute this delegation? Yes or no? Right? What is your reaction going to be if it starts to fail 2, 3, 4 times? Right? Can you outsource? Do you have somebody or a partner, right, that you can give this to and let them delegate it without the emotion or without the feeling, right? If not, then it is really incumbent on you as the individual to regulate your behavior, your emotion, right? You have to search deep down inside and see what works for you. Right? Peter, you and I are both different in temperament, different in many different ways. But, the real skill is to say, what do I need to do, in order to regulate my behavior? Right? And one of the things that I do now is I ask myself, what do I need to do no matter, even if this fails 10 times personally? How do I not take it personally? Because eventually it sticks. Yeah. And however, sometimes in order for tasks or responsibilities to stick, it just requires that repetitive process of working with them over and over and over and over again. And we also don't see light at the end of the tunnel, because remember, if we're at 80% capacity, we're actually adding another 5 to 10% capacity by doing the task and training the task as well. So we need to be mindful that it's almost as though we're lifting our workload, right, without seeing any light at the end of the tunnel. But we need to tell ourselves that this is only temporal, and that we're actually this 90% workload will drop down to about 70, 65.
If let's talk practically, let's say I'm a CEO, I'm doing sales at the moment, I'm doing sales, marketing, I'm overwhelmed, and I start delegating my sales to a sales manager. What should I expect if I'm 100%? If I do it like this and I delegate it out at the beginning, what should my expectations from a percentage ratio be for a successful delegation? Do they need to be 80% as good as me? 50%? What do you think?
You ideally, I think if you find somebody who's between 80 to 90%, I think you're one of the luckiest people in the world, right?
What's the benchmark?
Well, I would say something around 65 to 75%, right? Is a very good introduction, yeah? Because we want those people to grow. We can't expect anybody to come in, as though this is not a relay race where you've got 4 100-meter sprinters, right? Where they're all going to run at the same time. We don't have that, right? We don't have that luxury. You're getting people to come in, understand you, understand your business practices, understand the culture, understand the task requirements, So there'll need to be a lead time of about 6 to 12 months in order for those to happen. But however, that is the expectation, right? There you go. If you can do it in a faster time, that's fantastic. However, set your expectations low so that you're not disappointed, right?
So basically what you're saying is if someone can do the task 60 to 70% at my rate, then I should consider that success. I shouldn't consider that failure. And I invest in getting that person from 60 to 70% up to 100, where my standard is over a period of time.
Yeah. Just be, Peter, be really, really mindful that, that 100% target is fantastic, but we also want to make sure that they don't burn out as well, right? When we look at delegation of tasks and roles within an organization, we need to be very, very mindful that we don't want that, if you're consumed by tasks and work, you don't have the capacity to think strategically, right? So, you ideally want to have that, you ideally want to have 75 to 80% capacity. You want 10% for strategic thinking, and then you want 10% for them to just kind of have that ability to kind of stop, reflect, and unwind a bit. Right? We want sustainability more than right than just sheer unadulterated output. Right,
George, what I've learned is that not only do they go to 100%, but where I've delegated, they've gone over and beyond. A lot of time when I give them space and I take them on a journey, they end up doing it so much better than me. They do it 2 or 3 times better than what I was doing it. And I think the beauty of growing as a leader is that when you learn how to delegate and you get better at it, you actually allow for an environment for people to come and do things that are much better than you. And then you kind of drift away. And that, to me, that's success. If you can nurture an organization where everyone can do everything better than you, then to me, that's success, rather than you having to be the one that does everything perfectly.
And to add to that, it's actually quite a liberating experience too. How do you measure your success? Well, you measure your success by the growth. And how do you measure growth? By the amount of employees that come. The more you're able to do this, the greater you're able to grow. And delegating and allowing, and as you said, Peter, allowing those people to kind of take what you do and then construct it in their own form and then build it and grow it on their own is one of those big ticks that we talk about, especially around making work meaningful to employees. Right?
Yeah.
And it's really the key. But as going back, understanding work-life balance, delegation. I mean, if you don't get a handle on it, it can send you back to zero.
So we've spoken about burnout, which is a natural phenomenon that happens. We've spoken about delegation as the way to prevent it from continuing to happen. And then when you get delegation right, you spoke about a word called balance. You can get to a point where you can go from being 70, 80, 90% stressed to having some type of balance where you can work on the skills, the qualities, strategic thinking, and yourself. Right? Because ultimately that's what it's all about. What does balance mean to you? What's your understanding of balance?
I think balance is being comfortable. And we look at what is the outcome of balance. Yeah. Is it for me, it's the ability to have a nice, comfortable sleep at night, most times. It's the ability to take meetings at very short notices. It's the ability to read what I need to read in a very comfortable manner, right? Balance is the ability to not be overwhelmed, not just in the daytime, but also in the evening with work. And balance is the overall comfort level that I have with the trajectory of how my businesses are going.
That's awesome. I think for me, it's everything that you said, and also I tend to think of life as a circle, a wheel, and you have to have all the pieces. connected together for that wheel to actually roll in motion. And your wheel looks different to my wheel, looks different to the next person, but you really need to have clarity to define the components of your life that are important to you, and make sure that none of them are neglecting. They're all kind of like coming together to your best ability, and making sure that you have that balance and, you know, getting things in order to get there.
I think, each individual has their own circumstances, but there is that inner voice that kind of tells us when things are right and things are wrong. And it's important. And I'd say this from my own experiences, is that you really listen to that inner voice where it's kind of where the red lights are starting to flash, especially around balance. If you're not thinking straight, it means is that your mind is consumed with what needs to be done, as opposed to what has to be, what has to be done, as opposed to what needs to be done going forward, especially from a business perspective. So just be mindful and do listen to yourself, right? That's the key.
Now you and I have one of those voices that flashes. It's a community voice. I'm not going to let you go without talking about community. And I think the older and wiser you get, the more you learn the beauty of working with other people and giving. How does community come into your thinking and the clients you advise and the work that you do?
Community is important. Firstly, is that we all think that we live on an island or in a particular silo, and that whatever I'm going through is mine and mine only, right? And it's only unique to me, But however, once you start to open up, you'll see that whatever it is that you're going through is a very, very common thing amongst other people as well. To me, the most liberating thing is to, when you're able to share that, when you're able to share your problem and somebody is able to understand, and when you're younger, give you advice on what to do. And the flip side of that also is that when somebody shares that with you, as we're doing now, you're able to kind of give that advice and share with them and so forth. So community becomes really, really important. It almost acts as almost like a counsel, as almost like an area for counseling, and helping you with whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah, I really believe that ambitious people, when you're ambitious, you're odd, and ambitious people need to be around other ambitious people to thrive. We don't need to be around other ambitious people to function, but if you want to thrive and grow and have that balance, then you really need to surround yourself with a community of people that are ambitious like you. Yeah,
look, I being odd should be something that they're very comfortable with, because from the outside in, people go, oh, what a bit of a weirdo, right?
Yep.
But to most people out there, probably don't understand all those, what needs to be done from our perspective. There are probably weird things that you do. There's certainly a lot of weird things that I do as well, right? That a lot of people just kind of scratch their head and not understand. However, be comfortable being odd, right?
Yeah.
And
fun.
I wanted to touch on that because I get labeled sometimes as being weird. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's a label of pride. I think, when you're yourself and you're comfortable, that's a sign of success. That's a sign of balance too, when, you can be yourself. And thank you very much for sharing. Thank you very much for your insights. As always, I love our conversations. Any final words?
Thanks a lot, first of all, Peter, for always the opportunity to talk. And, this is really a serious issue, especially burnout. Once you don't understand the gravity of it until you actually go through it. And I would like to say to the audience out there is that really be mindful that, if you're approaching anything like this, don't take it for granted. It's something that really needs to be addressed and addressed quickly, because if it's not, you lose significant time, money, and also a breakdown in relationships as well. So, it has significant detrimental effects across everything that you do.
Awesome. George, absolute final question. I keep squeezing him in. What are you reading?
I'm actually, right now, the book is in my car, but I'm actually reading a textbook, an undergraduate textbook on change management, right?
Awesome.
Anybody, for those out there, the easiest way to understand the topic is to go and buy an undergraduate's textbook on whatever it is that you're studying. It gives you a fantastic overview.
Well, there you go, guys. Awesome hack. And we'll take you up on it. I don't know if I'll be reading any textbooks over Christmas, but I think we'll have another podcast before Christmas, if that's
I'm sure we will.
I know you're traveling, and I'll get a Christmas reading recommendation from you, George. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter. Once again.
Thank you.